Have you ever written something and afterwards thought, I have no idea where that came from? A line of dialogue arrives fully formed, or a character does something you didn't plan? Perhaps a scene suddenly turns in a direction that feels more alive than anything you could have outlined. And for a moment, writing doesn't feel like forcing words onto the page. It feels like receiving something, following something, listening to something deeper than the busy analytical part of your mind. That, my friends, is the place we're talking about today, because some of your best writing won't come from trying harder, and it won't come from mentally trying to force the perfect sentences or demanding that your brain explain every step before you begin. Some of your best writing comes when you quiet that part of your mind that wants to control everything, and instead you access the deeper imaginative layer of your mind, that place where imagination and memory and story and emotion all begin to meet. Today we're talking about writing from your imagination, not vague inspiration and not waiting for the muse to descend. I'm talking about a practical, repeatable way to access your creative subconscious before you write, so you can stop hovering above the story and instead start stepping into it. So if you've been feeling like writing is technically there but not alive, or you keep thinking about the scene instead of entering it, then this episode is for you. So stay with me. If you feel called to write a book, but writer's block, procrastination, and self-doubt keep pulling you from the page, you're not alone, and you're not meant to stay stuck. Hi, I'm Maddison Michaels, author and life coach, and I've created this podcast as a creative space grounded in faith and mindset transformations to help you break through your blocks, gain creative clarity, and finally finish the book you're meant to write. So grab your cup of liquid gold and let's write the darn book together. Before we dive in today, I'm so excited to let you know that on the 30th of June, I'm hosting a free masterclass on Zoom called Write to Your Wiring, Discover Your NLP Modality and How It Shapes the Way You Write. In this session, I'll be helping you understand how your mind naturally processes creativity, story, structure, dialogue, and emotion so that you can start working with the way you're uniquely wired to write rather than trying to force yourself into a process that was never designed for you. We'll explore the 4 NLP modalities for writers: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and auditory digital, and you'll begin to recognize how your dominant modality shapes the way you access your story, where you tend to get stuck, and what helps the words start flowing again. You'll find all the details in the show notes, or you can visit madisonmichaels.com/masterclass. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Write the Darn Book. I'm your host, Maddison Michaels, and today we're talking about writing from imagination and how to access your creative subconscious before you begin a writing session. And this matters so much because many writers are sitting down to the page trying to think their way into the story. They're analysing the scene, judging the sentences, and trying to produce something good before the story's even had a chance to breathe. And I understand that. I truly do, because the thinking mind absolutely has a place in writing. Structure has a place, craft has a place. But there's a point where the analytical brain becomes too loud. And when that happens, your imagination can't move freely. The story begins to feel stiff, the characters feel flat, and the writing might feel correct, but not alive. So today, we're going to look at the difference between writing from your head and writing from your imagination, and why the creative subconscious matters so much for writers, and how you can create a simple writing practice that helps you access that deeper, freer place before every writing session. And beneath all of that, we're also going to come back to something that sits at the very heart of Write the Darn Book, that you are the vessel for the story. And your job isn't to strangle the story into existence, though sometimes it definitely feels like we're trying to do that, doesn't it? But your job is actually to create the conditions where the words can flow through you and onto the page. And today, we're going to dive into how to practically do that, because there's a very different feeling between trying to control every word and allowing yourself to become available to the story that wants to come through you. So before we talk about how to access that deeper imaginative space, we need to name the difference between the two places writers often create from, because there's a huge difference between writing from mental pressure and writing from true imagination. And once you recognize the difference, you can start choosing a different way into the page. So writing from your head often feels like standing outside the story with a clipboard. You're observing it and assessing it and trying to make it behave. And you might be asking questions like, what should happen next? Is this good enough? Am I doing this properly? And those questions aren't wrong, but when they're running too early in the writing process, they can keep you in analysis instead of immersion. Writing from imagination feels different. It feels like you're stepping through a doorway and entering the story world from the inside. You're not only deciding what the character says, you're hearing how they say it. You're not only choosing the setting, you're noticing the light in the room, the texture of the chair, or the thing your character wants to admit but they can't quite say aloud. You're not pushing the scene from behind. You're walking into it and letting it reveal itself to you. That's the creative subconscious at work. And this is where I think writing becomes more than a mental exercise, because when you're truly inside your story, you're not only thinking, you're listening and you are receiving. And this is the part of writing that can feel almost sacred, not because it's grand or dramatic, but because it asks you to get quiet enough to hear what's trying to come through. And there's a humility in that, a sense of surrender, a willingness to say, I don't have to know every answer before I begin. I can open the door, follow the first thread, and trust that the story will meet me as I write. And that's what I mean when I say you are the vessel for your story. You still bring the craft and you still bring your lived experience and you still bring your discernment as well. But you are not the entire source of the story. You're the channel it moves through. Now, when I say creative subconscious, I'm not talking about something airy-fairy or mysterious in a way that can't be used practically. I'm talking about the deeper pattern-making part of your mind, the part that stores memory, emotion, and story instinct. That part has absorbed a lifetime of reading and living and imagining. Your conscious mind can only hold a small number of things at once. That's why writing can feel so overwhelming when you're trying to keep the plot, the character motivation, the emotional arcs all in your head at the same time. It's too much. Your conscious mind starts clenching and suddenly the story feels like a puzzle you're failing to solve. But your creative subconscious is so much wider than that. It can connect things in the background. It can bring forward images before you know what they mean. It can offer a line of dialogue that reveals a character more clearly than 3 paragraphs of analysis. The problem is that many writers have accidentally trained themselves to distrust it. We've been taught to value control, planning, get it right. And again, those things matter at certain stages. But if you only ever write from control, you will cut yourself off from the part of your mind that actually makes writing feel alive and so imaginative and full of fun. And this is where creative wiring matters. Some writers naturally access imagination through images. Some hear the scene and the characters. Some feel it in their body. And none of these are better or worse. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and auditory digital writers can all access the creative subconscious, but they often need different doorways into it. A visual writer might need to see the room before the words come. An auditory writer might need to hear a line of dialogue. A kinesthetic writer might need to feel the emotional tension in their body, whereas an auditory digital writer might need the right question or something precise enough for the analytical mind to relax and hand the scene over to the imagination. And this is where your bird writing personality can show up too. If you tend towards dove traits, then you might access emotional truth beautifully, but you might pull back if the writing feels too vulnerable. If you're more of an owl writer, you might tend to get stuck trying to understand the scene before you let yourself write it. If you gravitate towards peacock traits, you might receive vivid ideas quickly, but need a gentle container so that your imagination doesn't scatter into 10 different or new directions. If you gravitate towards an eagle writer, then you might push for momentum so hard that you skip the quieter imaginative signals. These are tendencies, not fixed boxes, but they help explain why writing from imagination can feel effortless for one writer and strangely unsafe for another. Because for some writers, imagination feels like freedom. For others, it feels like losing control. And that's the real shift we're making today. We're not throwing away structure and we're not abandoning craft. We're learning to let the deeper creative mind come forward first and then allow the analytical mind to support it afterwards. I want to tell you a story about this because I've experienced this difference so clearly in my own writing. There was a chapter that I once wrote where I'd done all the things I thought I was supposed to do. I knew the purpose of the scene, I knew where it sat in the manuscript, I understood the character's motivation and external goals, and on paper, I had enough to write it. But every time I sat down, the scene felt wooden. I could produce sentences, but there was no pulse in them. I was moving the characters around like chess pieces. He says this, she reacts, this happens next. It technically made sense, but it didn't feel like anyone was truly alive inside the scene. And the more I tried to fix it from my head, the worse it became. I kept asking logical questions. What's the scene goal? What's the conflict? What needs to be revealed? And those are useful questions, but I was using them at the wrong moment. I was trying to build the emotional life of the scene from the outside in. Eventually, I reached that familiar writer point where you're sitting at your laptop, you're staring at the screen, and you feel yourself becoming more frustrated with every passing minute. The cursor's blinking, my coffee's going cold, but I'm not writing. And I'm also not really resting though, because I'm locked in that strange no man's land where part of me is trying to work and another part of me is quietly backing away from the whole thing. So I stopped. I closed the laptop. I sat back, and instead of asking what should happen in this chapter, I asked a different question. I asked, what's actually alive here in the scene? And that was it. That was the doorway for me. I stopped trying to control the mechanics of the scene, and instead I allowed myself to feel my way into it. I imagined the room. I noticed where the characters were standing. I let myself sense what was being said. I heard the characters' dialogue in my head, and I stopped trying to write the scene correctly. And instead, I started listening for the emotional truth underneath it. And once I did that, the chapter changed. A character said something I hadn't planned. And it wasn't a big dramatic speech. It was just one sentence. But that one sentence shifted the whole emotional current of the scene. It revealed a wound I hadn't fully understood yet. And it changed the energy between the characters. It gave the scene a reason to exist beyond just plot mechanics. And once that happened, the chapter began to write itself. Now, when writers say a chapter wrote itself, we don't literally mean our hands were possessed and we had nothing to do with it. What we mean is that we stopped blocking the deeper creative process inside ourselves. We got out of our own way long enough for the story to move through us intuitively. That experience is one of the reasons I believe so strongly in the phrase, you are the vessel for your story. And you have to get out of the way to let the words flow through you and onto the page. Because when you're writing from your head alone, you're trying to manufacture the story. But when you're writing from your imagination, you're allowing yourself to receive it, to shape it, and to bring it through onto the page. And that is such an important distinction. Now, receiving the story doesn't mean you sit back and do nothing. And it doesn't mean you abandon your craft or you just wait passively for inspiration. It means that you stop grouping onto your story so tightly. You stop treating your story as something you have to dominate and control, and instead you begin treating it as something you're in relationship with. For me, this is deeply connected to faith and intuition. It's the sense that creativity isn't only generated by the conscious mind, that there's something larger available to us when we get quiet enough to listen. And when you get quiet enough to listen, you become that vessel and your writing changes. You're no longer standing over the story demanding it perform. You're opening yourself to what it wants revealed on the page. There's still craft involved and there's still revisions. Unfortunately, we'll never get out of that, right? But the source of the writing feels different. It becomes less like dragging something out of yourself and more like opening a channel to something that was waiting beneath the noise. And I know that can sound abstract until you experience it, so let's make this practical. Here's the key thing I want you to understand. You can train your mind to enter the imaginative state more reliably and regularly. You don't have to sit around waiting for inspiration. You don't have to hope that the muse turns up. You can create the conditions that tell your nervous system and your imagination and your creative subconscious that it is safe to come forward. This begins with a transition. Most writers make the mistake of moving straight from ordinary life into the manuscript. They go from emails, life and administration and decision fatigue, and then they open up their writing and try and dive straight into the story. And then they wonder why their imagination doesn't instantly open up. But your creative mind needs a doorway. You need a small ritual that moves you from the surface mind into that imaginative story mind. And it doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, if it's too complicated, you won't do it. So I want to give you a really simple practice that you can use before every writing session. I call this the imagination doorway. And the first part is to quiet the analytical brain. So before you open the manuscript, take 1 minute, just 1 minute, to physically settle your body. So put your feet on the floor, let your shoulders drop, take a slow breath in, and then a longer breath out. You're not trying to become perfectly calm. You're simply letting your body know that there's no emergency here. The page isn't a threat and the story isn't a test, so you are safe to enter it. This matters because when your nervous system is activated, your analytical brain often gets louder. It wants certainty, it wants control, it wants to protect you from judgment and failure or wasted time. So rather than fighting that part of yourself, give it reassurance. You might say to yourself, I'm not here to get this perfect. I'm here to enter the story. Or you might use the phrase that sits at the heart of my own writing practice, I always say to myself, I am the vessel for the story. I just have to let the words flow through me and onto the page. And that is my anchor. That is how I return to my imaginative story every time. The phrase itself isn't about handing away responsibility. It's about releasing the pressure that says everything has to come from effort and control and conscious force. It reminds your nervous system that you don't have to wrestle the book into existence. You can soften, you can listen, and you can allow. And for some writers, that one sentence can become the bridge between the busy world outside and the deeper creative space where the story is waiting. Now, the second part is to ask an imagination opening question, not a controlling question like, how do I make this scene brilliant, which will only cause you more pressure. Instead, ask a question that invites the subconscious to bring something forward. Try one of these. What's alive in this scene? What does my character already know but refuses to say? Or what does my reader need to feel here? Pick one question, only one, and the goal isn't to interrogate the scene. The goal's to open up the doorway. Then close your eyes or soften your gaze and let an image or a sound or a feeling arise inside you. You're not forcing it. You're allowing the first thread to appear. It might be visual, it might be physical, it might be one sentence of dialogue that you hear, or it could be a motivational thought regarding the logic of the story. Let it arrive in the way that your mind naturally works. This is where your modality matters. If you're a visual writer, ask yourself, what can I see? And look for the first image, that doorway into your story. It could be the weather of the scene, the object on a table, or the characters doing something. Just let the scene appear before you describe it. If you're an auditory writer, listen. What's the first sound that you can hear in the scene? It could be a voice, or footsteps, or silence. Let the sound draw you in. If you're a kinesthetic writer, feel for the emotional temperature of the scene, that resonance. Is there tension in your chest, or dread, or relief? Let the feeling guide the first words. If you're an auditory digital writer, ask a precise question and let the answer come without debating it. What's the function of this scene? What's the truth being revealed? What decision changes because of this moment? Once your analytical mind has a clear doorway, it can often relax enough for your imagination to move and flow. Now, the third part is to write before you judge. And this is where the practice either works or collapses. Because if you receive an image or a line of dialogue or a feeling or an impression, and then you immediately judge it, you're slamming the door shut. The analytical mind jumps back in and says, is that good? Does that make sense? Is this the right place to start? So for the first 10 minutes, your job is to follow. Write the image, write the line, write the feeling, write that clumsy first sentence if that's what comes. Begin anywhere. You can shape it later. You can revise it later. And you can bring back the craft into it later. But at the beginning, your task is to let the words come through before you start measuring them. And this is the part so many writers miss. They want the subconscious to speak, but they keep interrupting it and they're not listening. So imagine having a conversation with a shy child who's trying to tell you something really important, but every 3 words you correct their grammar or you question their logic or you ask them whether they're actually sure. And eventually that child stops speaking. Your imagination isn't a machine. It's responsive. It comes forward when it senses that it's welcome and that there's a sense of curiosity and enough safety to be imperfect. So when something comes, receive it, write it down, follow it for 10 minutes before you decide what it means. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you build this practice into your writing sessions, your mind begins to recognize the pattern. Feet on the floor, a breath in, a breath out, doorway question, and then 10 minutes of following what comes before judging what you're writing. And over time, that becomes an anchor into your imagination. And that's how your system learns that this is how I enter my story. Now, let's be clear, this won't make every writing session magical. Some sessions will still be messy. Some scenes will still need revision and structure. And some days you'll access only the tiniest thread, and that's okay. The goal isn't to create a dramatic creative breakthrough every time. The goal is to stop approaching your manuscript like a problem to solve, and instead you begin to approach it like a world you can enter. That shift changes everything. Because when you write from imagination, your manuscript begins to carry more life. The descriptions become more specific, the dialogue feels less manufactured, and the emotional heartbeat of the story deepens. And perhaps more importantly, you begin to trust that there's more inside you than what your analytical mind can immediately explain. That trust is a writer's gold, and it's what allows you to keep going when the next step isn't perfectly clear. It's what lets you draft a scene before you know every detail, and it's what helps you stay open to the book becoming richer than the version you planned. And this is especially important for writers who are stuck because they're trying to control the story before they've listened to it. And sometimes the next scene doesn't need more thinking. Sometimes it needs a question or a breath or enough quiet for the deeper story to answer. So here's what I want you to do this week. Choose one writing session and make it imagination-led, not performance-led and not productivity-led and not prove you're a real writer type-led, but imagination-led. Before you open the manuscript, take 1 minute to settle your body, then ask one doorway question. What's alive in this scene? What does my character already know but refuse to say? Or perhaps what does the reader need to feel here? Then let the first impression arrive in whatever way your mind gives to you. Image, sound, or feeling, whatever comes, write from there for 10 minutes without judging it. Just 10 minutes. You can go longer if the words start flowing, of course, but your commitment is 10 minutes of following the thread before your analytical mind gets to comment. And if a part of you thinks, but what if it's bad? Let it be bad for 10 minutes. Bad writing can be shaped. Blank pages cannot be edited. The point of this practice is not to produce perfect prose or words. It is to respect the channel between you and the deeper imaginative layer of your story. Because your book isn't only built through planning, it's built through listening, it's built through trust, and it is built through learning how to become available to your story. That might sound simple, but it's one of the biggest identity shifts a writer can make. Instead of seeing yourself as someone who has to force the words, you begin to see yourself as someone who can receive them, shape them, and bring them through you and onto the page. That's the heart of this work. You're not here to be a machine, and you're not here to produce perfect sentences on command. You're here to become a clear, steady, and trusted vessel for the story that's chosen you. So when you sit down for that imagination-led writing session this week, begin with this. I am the vessel for my story. I just have to let the words flow through me and onto the page. Then breathe, ask your doorway question, listen for what comes, and write from there. And if this episode has made you curious about the way your mind naturally accesses story, imagination, and creative momentum, I'd love to invite you to my free masterclass, Right to Your Wiring. It's happening on Tuesday, the 30th of June at 10 a.m. Sydney time. And for those of you who register, a replay will be available too. And in the masterclass, I'll walk you through the NLP writing modalities and show you how they shape the way you write. We'll look at how visual and auditory writers access story, how kinesthetic writers write through feeling, and how auditory digital writers use structure and language to create. You'll begin to understand why certain writing advice works so good for one writer and completely fails for another. And then how to build a writing process that fits the way your mind actually works. And if you can't attend, please remember to register because you will get that replay. So save your free spot at madisonmichaels.com/masterclass. The link is in the show notes too. Because remember, my friends, you don't need to force yourself into someone else's writing process. You need to understand your own creative wiring, trust the way your imagination speaks, and build a writing practice that helps the words flow through you and onto the page. And remember, my friends, you are that vessel for the story, so let the words flow through you and onto the page. Until next time, take care, and let's write the darn book together. My friend, I hope today's episode gave you exactly what you needed for your writing journey. And if it did, would you take 30 seconds to share it with another writer who's struggling to start or finish their book? And if you're loving the show, I'd be so grateful if you left a quick review. It means the world to me and truly makes my day to know that this podcast is helping you. And as you head back into your week, I hope you feel more supported and connected to your creativity. And remember, you're a vessel for the story. So let the words flow through you and onto the page. All right, I'm off to refill my cup of liquid gold and go and do a little writing of my own. Take care, and I'll meet you back here in the next episode of Write the Darn Book.